When a kind-hearted waitress sees an old man struggling to pay for his coffee, she quietly covers the bill, never expecting anything in return. But what she doesn't know is that this old man is hiding a secret. He's a billionaire on a mission. What happens next will leave you speechless. This heartwarming story reminds us that one small act of kindness can ripple into life-changing moments. The morning had a silence to it, not the peaceful kind, but the kind that settles deep in your chest like an echo waiting to be filled. A thin mist clung to the streets of Norbridge, rolling in from the sea as if it, too, was trying to find warmth. The buildings in this part of town wore age like a coat. Bricks weathered, paint peeling, windows cloudy with time. Nestled between a shuttered tailor's shop and a boarded-up bookstore stood the Wren's Nest Cafe, its sign swinging gently in the wind. It was a humble place. No flashing lights, no polished chrome or marble counters, just a comforting scent of fresh bread, the hum of a worn-out espresso machine, and the warmth of small-town familiarity. Inside, the cafe buzzed with its own quiet rhythm. Mugs clinked, chairs creaked, and the soft murmur of the morning radio filled the spaces between conversations. Lila Brennan, the heart of the cafe, moved with a practiced grace behind the counter. Her curly brown hair was tied back with faded ribbon, and her apron bore the evidence of 100 busy mornings. At 29, Lila had learned that life didn't always deliver what it promised. Dreams had taken a back seat to responsibility long ago. She had once dreamed of studying literature, maybe even writing a book of poetry someday. But those dreams were now folded away, like old letters in a drawer. Her younger brother, Danny, had shown promise in school, and she'd vowed he wouldn't be held back the way she had been. So she worked 2 shifts a day, 6 days a week. A life measured not in adventures, but in tips and tired feet. Under the register, she kept a leather-bound notebook. No one knew about it. Between orders, she'd sometimes jot down a line or two of poetry, fragment of thought that gave her day color, even if only for a moment. That particular morning, she was making idle conversation with Stan, the local mailman, who dropped by every Tuesday for a blueberry muffin and decaf. They joked about the weather, the mayor's broken campaign promises, and whether muffins could be tax-deductible as emotional support food. It was all routine, predictable, safe. Then the bell above the door chimed. Soft, almost hesitant. An elderly man stepped in, moving like he'd spent the night wrestling with the cold. His coat was a shade of gray that had given up trying to be any other color, and his shoes, once black, now bore patches of salt stains in time. His knitted cap looked handmade, frail on the edge like it had belonged to someone else before him. His posture was slightly stooped, but there was a certain dignity to the way he moved, as though every step was a choice. He said nothing, didn't even meet anyone's gaze, just quietly made his way to the booth in the far corner, the one with a cracked leather cushion and a view of the sea through the fogged-up glass. It was the kind of seat that made you feel hidden, safe. Lila noticed the way his fingers trembled slightly as he settled in. She poured a fresh cup of coffee, her eyes tracking him as she crossed the room. "Coffee to warm you up?" she asked gently, her tone soft enough not to startle. The man nodded once, barely lifting his eyes. "Please," he said, his voice raspy and quiet, like it hadn't been used much lately. "Just 1 cup." She returned with the steaming mug, placing it gently before him. He hesitated, staring at the cup as if it were an offering too generous. Then his hands moved awkwardly to his coat pockets. He patted them, frowned, checked again. His expression grew tight. Embarrassment crept into the lines of his face. When he looked up, his eyes glistened. I thought I had some change," he said, voice barely audible. "I'm sorry." Lila could feel the tension stretching around the cafe like a drawn string. A few nearby patrons looked over, curious but not concerned. One of the other waitresses, Cara, leaned over from the counter with a scoff. "Can't even pay for a coffee, huh?" she muttered under her breath, loud enough to wound. Lila's jaw tightened. She shot Cara a look that needed no words. Then, without hesitation, she pulled a bill from the pocket of her apron and set it on the counter. "This one's on me," she said, her voice even but kind. "Everyone deserves a warm drink, especially on a cold day." The man blinked. staring at her as though she just handed him a map back to a place he thought no longer existed. Gratitude flickered in his expression, but deeper than that, there was something else, something like recognition, like he'd seen a glimmer of something rare, buried in a world that had grown sharp and indifferent. He wrapped his fingers around the mug, as if to make sure it was real. Lila didn't ask for thanks. She just smiled, turned, and went back to wiping tables. Outside, the fog clung to windows, but inside, something had quietly shifted. Something warm had taken root. The days in Norbridge passed slowly that winter, each morning brushing a fresh coat of frost on the windows of the Wren's Nest Cafe. The mist that rolled off the sea grew heavier, clinging to the town like a memory that wouldn't let go. But inside the cafe, a quiet ritual had begun. Every morning, just after the first rush of commuters, the elderly man would return, always in the same corner booth, always in the same threadbare coat. He never arrived in a hurry, never left in haste. There was a softness to his presence, like he didn't want to disturb the world, just briefly exist within it. Lila noticed things about him. How he always removed his cap with care before sitting down. How he folded his hands neatly on the table before she arrived with the coffee he never paid for. She never asked him to. She never even brought it up again. He, in turn, offered something far more valuable than payment. Conversation. At first, their exchanges were brief and polite. A remark about the rain. A comment on the smell of cinnamon buns wafting from the kitchen. But day by day, word by word, they peeled back the layers of polite silence and began to talk. Really talk. His name, he said, was Mr. Alden Marsh. His voice was low but deliberate, and when he spoke, he chose his words like a man who knew the weight they carried. He told her stories in pieces, snippets of a life that sounded more like a travelogue than a personal history. He spoke of Vienna in the fall, of boarding trains through Eastern Europe, of reading Russian literature under candlelight in a cabin on a snow-covered hillside. But behind the elegant pictures he painted, there were shadows. Lila noticed how his eyes dimmed when he mentioned his wife, Clara, and how he always paused before saying her name, as if to steady the ache it stirred. "She passed 10 winters ago," he said once, his gaze drifting toward the sea. Since then, the world's been quieter. Lila listened, not with pity, but with presence. And when he asked about her life, he did so with a rare sincerity. He didn't just want to hear her answers. He wanted to understand them. "What made you start writing poetry?" he asked one morning. His fingers curled around the warm ceramic of his mug. "I think," she paused, surprised at the question, "I think it's the only way I've ever felt like I had a voice. Life moves so fast, and writing slows it down long enough for me to feel like I belong inside it." He nodded deeply, as if that answer mattered more than any he'd received in boardrooms full of executives. She told him things she hadn't told anyone in years, about growing up without her parents, about raising Danny from the time he was 15, about how sometimes she felt like she was running on fumes, but didn't know how to stop, about how the only dream she ever allowed herself to keep was one she whispered to the stars on sleepless nights. "I always wanted to open a cafe," she admitted one foggy Tuesday. "A place where no one feels like they have to earn kindness, where the first cup of coffee is free, just to say, 'You're welcome here.' I call it the kind cup." She laughed softly, almost embarrassed by the simplicity of it. It probably sounds silly, but Mr. Marsh didn't laugh. He looked at her with the kind of intensity that silences self-doubt. "Not silly," he said, "just rare." She smiled, tucking a strand of hair behind her ear, unsure how to respond. What Lila didn't know, what not a soul in Norbridge suspected, was that Alden Marsh was no ordinary elderly man. He was not poor. He was not lost. And he certainly wasn't who he appeared to be. Years ago, Alden had been known among the elite circles of global finance as the brilliant and private mind behind Marsh & Coulter, one of the most successful investment firms in the world. He'd built empires through quiet genius and unshakable discipline. His fortune was estimated in the billions, his influence vast. But behind the headlines and accolades was a man who had grown increasingly disillusioned by the life he created. After Clara passed, the lavish parties fell hollow. The conversations turned transactional. The people around him began to blur into a single, predictable type, those who smiled too wide, praised too often, and always somehow had something to gain. He had wealth beyond imagination, but what he lacked, what he yearned for, was authentic connection, real people, real moments. So, one day, he disappeared from the spotlight. No interviews, no boardroom appearances. He dressed down, retreated to quieter towns, and sat in ordinary cafes, hoping to find something that resembled sincerity. Most places, he was dismissed as a vagrant or an odd old man. Some people ignored him entirely. Others treated him like a burden. But Lila had seen him before she ever knew his name. She had looked him in the eye, without judgment or calculation, and offered kindness with no expectation. And to Alden, that one gesture, simple as it seemed, was worth more than every million he'd ever earned. Winter in Norbridge settled in with a kind of quiet authority. Snow blanketed the sidewalks like a soft hush over the town's chatter, muting footsteps and slowing time. Inside the Wren's Nest Cafe, the windows frosted around the edges, creating little halos of warmth where the glass met the cold. It was during these snowy mornings that Lila and Alden's friendship truly began to take shape, not with grand gestures or dramatic confessions, but through slow, steady conversation. Small truths traded over coffee, like tokens in private language only they understood. They often sat in the corner booth, long after the rush had passed. Lila, on break with a lukewarm mug of tea, and Alden, nursing his one free coffee with both hands wrapped around the cup like it held something sacred. Their talks drifted beyond books and weather. They spoke of value, not the kind you can measure in digits or stocks, but the invisible kind. The kind written in how people treated each other when no one was watching. Lila shared how, some days, she felt like part of the furniture. People coming glued to their phones, she said once, looking out the foggy window. They order without looking at me. Some even talk over me. It's like I'm part of the machine, invisible until their coffee's late. Alden listened carefully, as he always did. His eyes didn't wander. He never interrupted. When she finished, he sat back and nodded slowly. "I know that feeling more than you think," he said. "There are days I give everything I own for a single conversation without someone angling for a favor, a donation, or an introduction. Just once. I like to sit across from someone who doesn't see a bank account." Lila studied him, her brow slightly furrowed. "That's hard to imagine, coming from you. I mean, you have a certain elegance about you, even in that old coat." He chuckled softly, the sound low and genuine. "Elegance," he repeated with a smile. "No one's called me that in years." There was something grounding in their connection. Two people from vastly different worlds, meeting in the same space between loneliness and longing. The more they talked, the more they came to understand that true value wasn't found in wealth or prestige, but in moment of honesty, in the ability to be seen and heard. Then one morning, as snow drifted lazily from the sky, like falling feathers, Alden surprised her. "Lila," he said, standing by the door as she wiped down the counter, "would you consider closing early today?" She looked up, blinking. "Closing early? I'd like to show you something," he said, his tone calm but laced with something else. Something like anticipation. Lila hesitated. She rarely stepped away from the cafe. Routine was her anchor, but something in his eyes softened her resistance. "Okay," she said after a moment. "Let me grab my coat." They walked in silence through Norbridge's older streets, where cobblestones peeked through the snow and gas lamps flickered against the pale afternoon light. It was a part of town that felt suspended in time, with buildings that leaned slightly from age and alleys that echoed old stories. Alden led her to a brownstone building tucked between a music shop and a flower stand closed for the season. Its windows were dusty, the paint chipped, and a large for lease sign hung in the corner of the front window. Lila glanced at it, then at him. "You brought me here for a real estate tour?" she joked lightly. Alden didn't smile at first. He just looked up at the building, his hands deep in his coat pockets. "I used to own this place," he said after a pause. "Actually, I still do." Lila turned toward him, surprised. "You?" He finally smiled, the kind of smile that started in the eyes. "There's something I haven't told you, Lila." She tilted her head. "You mean other than owning mystery buildings?" He took a breath, then met her eyes. I'm not who you think I am. My name is Alden Marsh. That part is true. But the rest, the old man sitting in the corner every morning, fumbling for change, that was only part of the story. He gestured to brownstone, the snow crunching softly beneath his feet. I've spent the last decade stepping out of the life I built. I am the founder of a firm called Marsh & Calter. Maybe you've heard of it. Lila's eyes widened. The name wasn't just familiar. It was etched into the headlines of every financial magazine she'd ever skimmed in waiting rooms. You're that Alden Marsh? She asked quietly. He nodded. She blinked, stunned. Why come here like that? In disguise? He looked back at the building. Because after my wife died, I realized something terrifying. Everyone around me wanted something from me. Money, connections, power. And the more I gave, the lonelier I became. So I started traveling. Not as a billionaire. Just as a man looking for something real. She took a step closer, her breath visible between them. And you came in Norbridge? I came looking for a place that felt human again, he said. But I found something more. I found you. The words caught her off guard, her heart thudding louder than she wanted to admit. I wasn't testing you, he continued. I wasn't playing a game. I just wanted to see if kindness still existed without conditions. And what you did that day when I had nothing to offer you, it did more than warm me. He looked at her, his voice low and sincere. It woke me up. A few weeks after that life-changing day, Alden surprised Lila with an offer that felt like a dream woven into reality. Over one quiet afternoon at the cafe, as they sat together amidst the soft clatter of cups and gentle murmurs of early patrons, Alden leaned in and said, I want to help you make your dream come true. I'll fund your cafe, every single penny, with no strings attached. Lila's eyes widened in disbelief. What do you mean? She asked, her voice wavering between hope and caution. Alden smiled, a spark of mischief and sincerity dancing in his eyes. I mean that you can open a kind cup, a place where everyone is welcome. I don't want anything in return, he explained, pausing as if to savor the moment, except maybe one small thing, a chair in the corner for me, and one more cup of coffee every morning. At first, Lila hesitated. Why me? She asked softly. There are so many people with dreams, so many deserving of opportunities. Because when no one else looked, you did, Alden replied earnestly. When you had nothing to gain, you gave freely. That kind of kindness, Lila, is a rare gift. It's what makes you truly special. Over the next few months, Lila threw herself into the planning and designing of her cafe. Every detail was chosen with care. From the soft lighting that bathed the room in a gentle glow, to the mismatched chairs that told stories of travels in time. She poured her heart into every sketch and every decision, turning a once-forgotten corner into a haven of warmth and welcome. Finally, on a brisk spring morning, the kind cup opened its doors in the very spot Alden had shown her. The space was transformed. The walls were adorned with handwritten notes from early visitors, each message a reminder of hope, gratitude, or simple joy. In one cozy corner, a comfortable chair, reserved especially for Alden, sat beneath a window that framed the bustling street outside. Every customer who walked in was greeted with a free cup of coffee and a smile that felt like a genuine welcome home. Regulars quickly discovered that this was no ordinary cafe. Here, the first cup was on the house, not because of a marketing gimmick, but as an invitation to connect, to share stories, and to be seen. Before long, word of the kind cup spread to the town like the gentle ripple of a well-loved secret. Curious journalists began to visit, intrigued by the cafe that offered kindness without expecting anything in return. Yet, amid the newfound attention, Lila remained focused on what mattered most: the people. She listened intently to stories, shared moments of laughter, and even offered a quiet shoulder to those who needed it. In the soft hum of conversations and the clink of coffee cups, the kind cup blossomed into a living testament to a simple truth, that even the smallest act of generosity can create ripples of change, inviting warmth and humanity into a sometimes cold and indifferent world. Years rolled by like gentle waves on the shore of Norbridge, each one carrying with it new faces, new stories, and new moments of quiet magic at the kind cup. And every morning, just as the cafe doors opened, Alden Marsh would be there, waiting patiently outside, bundled in his familiar coat, a book tucked beneath his arm, and a soft smile that had grown more relaxed with time. He had become a fixture, not just in the cafe, but in the hearts of the community. Locals knew him only as Mr. Marsh, the gentleman who always sat in the same corner seat, sipping his morning brew and watching the world pass with contentment in his eyes. Children waved at him on their way to school. College students often joined him to ask questions about life. He never flaunted his wealth, nor did he speak of the life he left behind. For Alden, the greatest joy came not from being known, but from watching kindness quietly flourish. And flourish it did. Under Lila's leadership, the Kind Cup became more than a cafe. It became a movement. Its warmth began to spill beyond the walls of the original location. With Alden's continued support and her own growing network of believers, Lila expanded the cafe into a small chain, each one carrying the same mission, a place where everyone was seen, where compassion brewed stronger than the coffee. She handpicked every staff member, not for experience, but for heart. No customer was ever turned away. Each location gave away its first cup of coffee, and in return, people left notes, drawings, poems, and sometimes even handwritten thank yous on the community walls. These tokens formed a mosaic of hope, a living, breathing gallery of humanity. But Lila didn't stop there. Inspired by Alden's journey in her own path, she launched the Kindness Grant, a foundation dedicated to helping others pursue dreams long buried under the weight of responsibility or circumstance. Whether it was helping a single mother open a bakery or supporting a student who wanted to teach art in underfunded schools, the grant became a quiet force for good. As for Alden, he remained quietly involved, never asking for credit, never seeking attention. He simply sat in his corner, watched the cafe come to life each day, and smiled as strangers became family. Then one peaceful morning, he didn't show up. The staff thought maybe he'd slept in or taken a rare day off. But the next morning, and the one after, the corner chair remained empty. It was Lila who found the note, tucked gently beneath the ceramic mug he always used, clean, polished, and waiting. On folded stationery, in his unmistakable handwriting, were words that made her eyes well with tears. The value of a life is not measured in digits, but in hearts touched. You reminded me of that. Thank you for the coffee, and so much more. M. Lila placed a note in a small frame and hung it just above his favorite seat. The chair, though now empty, was never removed. To this day, in the heart of Norbridge, people walk into Kind Cup and are greeted not by fancy menus or sleek designs, but by warm light, soft music, and the aroma of freshly brewed coffee they didn't have to pay for. First-timers often look surprised, hesitant, but once they taste the kindness, and not just a drink, they tend to return. Some come for a brief moment of rest. Others stay for hours, lost in books, conversations, or dreams finally spoken aloud. And some never leave at all, choosing to make the cafe a part of their lives, because it makes them feel alive. Above the counter, framed in wood from Alden's old brownstone, hangs a plaque with Lila's favorite quote, written in Alden's hand, his ink faded but timeless. Be the warmth someone needs when the world forgets how to give. And every so often, someone will ask about the story behind the cafe. Lila always smiles, her eyes drifting to the corner chair, still waiting, still sacred. Then she says, "It started with a cup of coffee and a woman who chose kindness when no one else did. If this story touched your heart, warmed your spirit, or reminded you the power of a simple act of kindness, please take a moment to subscribe. There are many more stories to come, each one brewed with hope, heart, and humanity. Subscribe now for more inspiring stories that remind us how one moment can change everything.